Hello there, and welcome to the Outside Views weekly magazine on German politics. Actually, the child benefit for the first three children should be increased to 237 euros next year. But now the increase is even greater. Families can expect a far greater increase in child benefit for 2023 than previously planned. The specialist politicians of the so-called traffic light groups of the Social Democrats, the Greens, and the Liberals agreed on Wednesday on an increase to 250 euros on January 1st, said the financial policy spokesman for the Liberals, Markus Heerbrand, to the Reuters news agency. That would be 31 euros more than at present. So far, an increase to 237 euros for the first three children was planned at the beginning of the year, as I said. From the fourth child, there's already 250 euros. With the agreement, the coalition agreed on changes to the Inflation Compensation Act, which is to be passed by the Bundestag, or which was passed by the Bundestag on Thursday. By agreeing on the reduction of the cold progression based on the autumn projection, we ensure that all taxpayers have more money at their disposal and are no longer asked to pay additional taxes through hidden tax increases, said Heerbrand. Together with the increase in child benefit to 250 euros and necessary changes in the solidarity surcharge law, the coalition has put together an overall package that also takes into account the individual ability of families and high earners. Now the states are asked to support the chosen path of relief and not to block it with exaggerated demands. The German cabinet has prohibited the sale of a chip production facility by the Dortmund-based company Elmos to a Chinese investor. The German press agency learned this from government circles on Wednesday. According to the DPA information, the cabinet prohibited another Chinese investment as well. The German newspaper Handelsblatt had reported that the federal government wanted to prohibit the acquisition of the Bavaria-based company ERS Electronic by a Chinese investor. ERS Electronic is a global company in the semiconductor equipment industry. In the case of Elmos, Federal Economics Minister Robert Habeck from the Greens had proposed to the cabinet that acquisitions by a Chinese company should be prohibited. An acquisition of the chip factory would endanger public order and security in Germany, according to circles of the Ministry of Economics on Tuesday. The ban, that means conditions are not suitable for eliminating dangers, though. The Dortmund-based company Elmos announced at the end of last year that it wanted to sell the production of so-called wafers in Dortmund to the Swedish competitor Silex for a total of around 85 million euros. Silex is a subsidiary of the Chinese Psy Group, though. Habeck said on Tuesday in Stuttgart that areas of critical sectors such as semiconductors and chips would be viewed with particular sensitivity. This means that we should reasonably assume that Chinese investments there have higher hurdles to overcome, and for me that includes Elmos. The Greens politician again warned against unprotected openness to foreign investors in Germany. Dortmund Mayor Thomas Westphal from the Social Democrats had criticized that if the business were to be banned, 225 jobs in Dortmund would be at risk. That would not have been the case with the sale. Now Elmos has to think about how to proceed, he said. The chips produced in Dortmund are an old technology that Elmos can no longer use for its own product line. On the other hand, the so-called wafer production that is now up for sale is important for medical test devices whose chips are based on older technology. Against the resistance of several departments and the urging of Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the cabinet recently decided that the Chinese group COSCO could take a 24.9% stake in a terminal in the port of Hamburg, instead of the planned 35%, though. Several ministers, including Habeck, wanted to ban participation completely. The Chancellor emphasized that it was not a question of selling the port, but only of acquiring a stake in a single terminal. But with 24.9%, they even couldn't ban that. Habeck's plans to make it more difficult for Chinese investors to take over German companies in key technologies, well, for example, like the chips here, will go on. The one-sided dependencies should be reduced and technology outflow of key technologies should be prevented. According to calculations by the IFO Institute, the federal government's 3 relief packages will cost the country around 135 billion euros in 2022, 23 and 24. That is 3.8% of economic output in 21. That's what the IFO said on Wednesday in Munich. The gas and electricity price break is therefore not included in the total. The IFO estimates their costs at a further 90 billion euros. Broken down by budget year, the IFO puts the relief from the 3 government packages at 33.3 billion euros this year and 49 billion euros next year. In 24, the sum would then amount to 52.2 billion euros. The biggest chunk this year is the net 10.4 billion for workers' energy money, explained IFO expert Max Ley. This was followed by 6 billion for the pensioners' energy money, 3.1 billion for the temporary reduction in energy tax, 2.7 billion for the increase in the basic tax-free allowance, 2.5 billion for the €9 ticket, and 2 billion euros for reducing sales tax on gas. In the coming year, according to the IFO calculation, the sales tax reduction for gas will even add up to 6.5 billion euros. IFO expert Andreas Peichel said that the loss of real income due to high energy prices must be borne by society. The state cannot prevent these losses, it can only redistribute them. That's a word. In Peichel's view, the state should follow 2 rules. Energy-saving incentives must be maintained across the board, and aid should only be given to households that are particularly affected. On the other hand, if the state tries to shield the entire population, it can provide fewer public goods or have to levy higher taxes in the future. In the dispute over the planned citizens' income, the Bürgergeld, a compromise is still not in sight. The Traffic Light Coalition and the union are at odds. The FDP, the Liberal chairman Christian Lindner, has shown himself open to possible changes to the citizens' income in a mediation process. The federal finance minister said this, the editorial network Germany. They can still negotiate anything. If we can still improve the additional income, that would be very good, he said. Taking up work is a step towards permanent independence from social benefits. That must be rewarded and not punished, he says. The Christian Democratic CDU leader Friedrich Merz told the newspaper Welt am Sonntag, with this law, the federal government is carrying out a complete system change in labor market policy. Compromises are difficult there. This so-called citizen money is the way to an unconditional basic income from tax funds. In addition, the law comes at the wrong time. Craftsmen, restaurateurs, small and large companies, they are all desperately looking for workers. And now, of all times, when it's more important than ever to get people into work, such a law is being passed, Merz said. The Federal Council is to vote today on the social reform. The Conservatives could block the government's central projects there. They vehemently reject the project, partly because they believe it reduces motivation to accept work. The traffic light parties reject this. The Bundestag, the federal parliament, had approved the citizen money on Thursday. In the event of rejection in the Bundesrat, the federal council, a compromise would have to be found in the joint mediation committee of the Bundestag and the Bundesrat. The traffic light plans for citizen income include an increase in the current standard rate of €449 for single people to €502. In addition, the unemployed are to be put under less pressure in the future by threatened withdrawal of benefits or by putting on sanctions, and instead be given more support with further training measures. In addition, the requirement for the permitted amount of assets and the size of apartment for benefit recipients are to be relaxed. The Social Democratic politician Stefan Weil has been elected Prime Minister of Lower Saxony for the 3rd time. The state parliament in Hanover voted on Tuesday by a majority for the 63-year-old who leads the coalition of the Social Democrats and the Greens. In a secret ballot, Weil received 82 yes votes, 62 MPs voted no, and there were no abstentions. The Social Democrats and the Greens together have 81 seats in the new state parliament. Because the entire legislative period of 5 years, he will remain in office. He wanted to replace the former CDU politician Ernst Albrecht as prime minister with the longest term in office in Lower Saxony. During his first term from 2013 to 2017, Weil governed together with the Greens. The alliance lost its one-vote majority early because a Green MP had switched to the Christian Democrats. A grand coalition of the Social Democrats and the Conservatives followed. However, before this year's state election, Weil made it clear early on that he was aiming for a return to red and green. With 33.4%, the Social Democrats was clearly the strongest force ahead of the Conservatives in the election. And with 14.5%, the Greens achieved their best result so far in Lower Saxony. As the fourth parliamentary group, the right-wing extremist AfD made it into the state parliament. The Liberals and the left, on the other hand, failed at the 5% hurdle. The SPD politician Hanna Naber was elected as the new president of the state parliament. In the new state government, the Social Democrats have 6 ministers in the departments of economy, home affairs, social affairs, justice, science, as well as federal and European affairs. The Greens received the finance, culture, environment, and agriculture departments. Weil's deputy is the new Minister of Education, Julia Willi Hamburg, from the Greens. The cabinet was also sworn in on Tuesday afternoon in the state parliament. The first major political project by Red Green is to be a relief package worth around 1 billion euros in the energy crisis. Small and medium-sized companies, daycare centers and schools, cultural and sports facilities, as well as the health and care sector should benefit from this. A supplementary budget for this is to be launched in November. In addition, the government wants to introduce a nationwide valid €29 monthly ticket for school children, trainees and volunteers. In addition, a state-owned housing company is to be founded for more affordable housing. The goals for climate protection and the expansion of renewable energies are to be tightened, and the starting salaries for many teachers are to be raised. In the new state parliament, the Social Democrats have 57 seats, the CDU 47, the Greens 24, and the AfD 18. Finance Minister Christian Lindner expects cost of around 83 billion euros for the planned price breaks for electricity and gas in the coming year. This emerges from the business plan for the 200 billion special fund, which is available to the German press agency, together with a revised draft budget for 2023. The 200 billion euros to cushion the high energy prices should be sufficient until 2024, but the finance minister is already planning more than half of this for the coming year. Of this, around 15 billion euros are used for the stake in the ailing utility Uniper. With the draft, the Liberal politician is also proposing that the Bundestag spend around 153 million euros more than planned on integration courses for Ukrainian refugees. In addition, around 140 million euros more are earmarked for the supply of crude oil to the PCK Schwedt refinery, which is important for northeastern Germany. There are also numerous relief measures that have already been decided, such as the heating cost subsidy and the housing benefit reform, with additional costs of 2.2 billion euros alone. According to the draft, the decision not to let the CO2 price rise in the coming year will also cost the federal government around 2 billion euros. How much debt Lindner can and wants to take up in the coming year, despite the debt break, was not that clear from the template. However, it is foreseeable that more loans will be permitted than previously thought due to the poor economic expectations. In return, Lindner must also expect more expenses. According to the Minister of Finance, interest payments on old loans alone should add up to 38 billion euros. Despite the fierce criticism of its actions, the climate movement Last Generation has announced an expansion of its radical protests. The activists also do not rule out a blockade of German airports. We will take our protests to all areas that will be affected by climate catastrophe. That's what activist Carla Rochel told RTL on Sunday. The union advocates tightening criminal law for climate activists, though. However, this met with rejection in the so-called traffic light coalition. Rochel said on the TV program Stern TV am Sonntag that her movement was not in a popularity competition. The activists were not about being liked, but about making society aware that we are in a climate catastrophe race. A focus should apparently be Munich. Some protesters were arrested there. When asked, the 20-year-old did not rule out blockades at German airports. In Amsterdam, climate activists partially paralyzed Schiphol Airport last week Saturday. The Last Generation group recently caused a stir with blockades of road traffic and attacks on famous paintings. However, the political dispute over the actions of the climate activists has intensified since a cyclist was run over by a cement mixer during a protest blockade in Berlin 1.5 weeks ago. A special vehicle from the fire brigade was stuck in a traffic jam due to the blockade and therefore arrived late at the scene of the accident. The Berlin police therefore filed criminal charges against 2 of the protesters, including for failure to provide assistance. The cyclist succumbed to her injuries in hospital 1 day later, I guess it was. Corona pandemic, Ukraine war and climate crisis. The first year of government was not easy for Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his traffic light coalition. The Germans see it that way too. An evaluation of Deutschland Puls, that's a long-term survey by CEWE on behalf of T-Online, shows that citizens hardly trust politicians to make improvements. To the question, how well is German politics currently able to solve the most important problems in the country, 68% of those questioned answered very poorly or rather poorly. Only 3% of those surveyed believe that politicians are very well able to do this. In January 2022, 24% of those surveyed saw a very good to good chance that the traffic light coalition could solve existing crises. Most recently, the Social Democratic chairwoman Saskia Esken defended the work of the Traffic Light Coalition in the face of various crises. Esken said on the ZDF program Berlin Direkt that the coalition is capable of acting, putting up relief packages, raising the money and being able to respond to the concerns and needs of the population. The Germans obviously see it differently. Only 19% currently believe that politics is able to solve the most important problems. The approval among right-wing AfD voters is the lowest. Conservative voters are also the least likely to believe that the traffic light coalition can handle the crises. Among the Social Democratic voters, belief in the competence of the federal government is highest, but only at 47%. The respondents see the greatest need for action in the areas of health, pensions and social systems, as well as in the economy and jobs. This was stated by a total of 46% of those surveyed. Environment and climate protection ranked 3rd. In April, the subject of foreign policy was still more in the focus of those surveyed, but it is now only in 4th place. And that was this week's German magazine, but I hope to see you, of course, here again in 1 week, but also on my other channels. They are all in the description of the video. And have a look at my on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, because there is another video every day that will not appear on YouTube because of the reused content stuff. I can't publish it here as well. So visit me there on either of those channels, and I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.